This season left me hollow inside. I hadn't even heard that season 3 came out until it was almost over, and I can see why. The story is all over the place. The season 2 finale was rushed since they didn't want to spend too much time finishing up the previous season. The overall plot has issues, the pacing was strange, and overall I'm torn on what actually does work here. But before I dive into all that, I'm going to be observing the plot unfold and try to wrap my head around just what exactly is happening with this show at this point, with Doom Patrol Season 3. The Doom Patrol show as a whole has a formula to their plot direction, or at least the last 2 seasons. Each character has a lot of stories to be told, and the overarching plot is introduced mainly as a device to tell those stories. Season 3 made that obvious, with how ridiculous the plot was. The antagonist this time around is the Sisters of Dada, who are trying to exact a plan that will force every person in the world to switch places with their subconscious, in hopes of them becoming better people through tackling their issues. On paper, that can be an interesting idea, with each main character being forced to face some of the most devastating moments of their past. But all of the main characters have already been tackling their past, so this approach is odd. It's a less involved and intimate way for our characters to deal with their own mistakes and traumas. Even strangers, each character for the most part, doesn't face any ideas that are even remotely new, which leaves their progression stunted. Pretty much every character from Season 2 is dealing with the same issues here, and not much more is learned. Even the characters that do tackle new ideas get really shallow moments for them, because of how short and simple they are to explore. Cyborg has a new struggle to explore, which involves being a person of color in society, and how that relates to his father's choice of how to save him. While there was a good moment here between the two of them, where he explains how he wanted his son to have a suit of armor that nobody could put down, there wasn't much to explore. In fact, this type of struggle treads ground Cyborg has already been tackling in the previous season, just in a new context. Clint, though, is worse, with his central struggle relating to wanting to be special, which is so odd for this issue to come up 3 seasons in, and how he tackles it feels very childish even for him. The tent scene in general was a huge mixed bag for me. The characters pretty much say, time for the character development scene, and start trying to improve, which felt really heavy-handed. And this sucks because this scene creates some really interesting moments for the characters to regress in believable ways. Clint's subconscious tells him that their stupid desire to be special cost their daughter Clara a better life, and how much has been ruined over their selfishness. And even though this scene should be for improvement, Clint refuses to accept the truth in front of him and doesn't change. Larry is in a similar position, with refusing to accept that going through with marrying his wife was his fault, knowing how he treated his family for all those years. There are nuggets of good moments here, but the vast majority of the season, sadly, felt sloppy and at times aimless. The season starts with wrapping up the previous season's plot. Since the show ended before the finale concluded, it was very rushed. Candlemaker kind of just giving up felt extremely wrong, but I can't accept it because they didn't want the last season's plot to ruin their ideas for season 3. But I'm very confused about many of the other choices here. I don't think I'm alone here when I say that Rita and the Sisters of Dada plot was not very good at all. The eternal flagellation was a pretty weak payoff, and even worse, the setup was not that enjoyable. The core of this issue resides in Rita, and the solo journey she goes on. Since the beginning of the show, she's been trying to find a purpose for herself, while struggling with her internal issues. Over time, I thought the payoff would be continuing to work on her problems, while finding a way to move forward. Instead, the show decides to introduce time travel and amnesia. This season shows how consistent introducing time travel and amnesia plots can ruin already established stories. Instead of Rita having to continue working on her issues, she goes back in time to a random place, loses all of her memories, and just becomes a different person because of it. Even when she gets her memories back, she doesn't change back from her new amnesia-created personality. This show took one of my favorite characters, threw away their conflicts, and essentially made them a different character with very uninteresting new conflicts. Her love story with Malcolm isn't much to get invested in, because they barely have any screen time or meaningful moments together, and the persecution of metahumans is bland compared to season 1 and 2, which already had the Bureau of Normalcy as important antagonists doing what we see here, and they're shown in a way that feels like they're reintroducing them, with how much time is spent with the organization. But an even bigger issue than Rita's character assassination and the time spent in the past is none of the members of the Sisters of Dada, aside from one, are given any characterization. I know almost nothing about Malcolm, even though he becomes Rita's driving motivation for the season. The Fog has a cool personality, but only has one scene to actually show off their ideas and motivation. Even stranger, they teased the Fog and Jane having a thing for one another, but they met one time, which again, like Malcolm, is not enough to make the affection between them believable. On a surface level, I like a few of the new characters, but they aren't given anywhere near enough time to leave a lasting impact. A perfect example is all of their powers. I had to look up what all of their abilities were, because not only does the show not explain it, but their portrayal is confusing. One of them has powers while sleeping, which wasn't shown, and another one has every power that her opponents haven't thought of. The only character from the Sisterhood that is given a lot of characterization is Madame Rouge, and for most of the season she is stricken with amnesia. Even worse than the amnesia, honestly, was her backstory. The season sets up how before losing her memories, she must have been someone super evil, and her new personality is afraid of that reality. But when she gets her memories back, and we see her history, it doesn't explain it. In the past, she worked at the Bureau of Normalcy and tried to help metahumans not be sent off to war when she could, but the whole time she apparently cared about power, and Rita asserts that the only reason she saved their group was to have power over them. From Madame Rouge's face, that doesn't exactly seem to be the reason she gave them up to the Bureau, but we never get to see the real reason. At some point she just ended up becoming evil, felt bad about it, and that's it. I don't want to call this season lazy, because there were a lot of individual moments that were good, but it feels like the writing here wasn't given as much care as the first two seasons had. The one aspect of this season that works extremely well though, was many of the new characters they introduced that could be explored in future seasons, and the theme at play. Revenge, and confronting your greatest pains that you caused. The complexity comes with trying to look back on those past events, and seeing nuance in how those things happened. Larry made a bad decision to get married, but felt like everyone around him forced him into it. Jane ended up hurting everyone in the underground, because she was beginning to neglect them in favor of Kay. The season had some elements done right, but sadly overall, the story here didn't work too well for me. Some of the side stories were cool, but the way characters progressed here kind of feels like a step back for their characterizations. I can only hope Season 4 is able to pull things back together. What did you think of Doom Patrol Season 3? What parts worked and didn't work for you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe. It costs nothing, and you can unsubscribe later on if you want. I hope to see you next time.